Let me ask you a question. When in life do you find your thoughts turning most often to God? Is it when times are easy or when times are hard? If you are like me, the answer is obvious. I find my thoughts turning to God far more often when times are hard. It is when sickness or sadness or trouble strikes that we naturally turn our thoughts and our prayers to God. When times are easy, when all seems well in our personal worlds, we who know God through Jesus Christ have an unfortunate tendency to go into a kind of spiritual cruise control. We take for granted the blessings that we are enjoying. Our prayers of thanks to God become almost mechanical. We are not alone. The tendency to forget God when times are good has plagued believers since recorded time began. The generation of Israelites to whom the three messages in the book of Deuteronomy were delivered was very much like us. Most of them had been born during the 38 years in the wilderness after the rebellion at Kadesh Barnea. But some of them had been alive during the miraculous events of the departure from Egypt. They had seen the 10 plagues. They had witnessed the parting of the Red Sea. They had walked safely across the dry seabed between two walls of water. They had watched as Pharaoh's armies attempted to follow them. They had seen those two walls of water come crashing down, drowning Pharaoh and his soldiers. All of that generation had experienced the daily miracle of the manna. With all that that generation had witnessed of the power and provision of God, we might think that forgetting God would be impossible for them. But God knew better. Listen as I read from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 10 to 15. As I read, keep in mind that within a few weeks, the Israelites would cross the Jordan River and begin the conquest of Canaan. So it shall be, when the Lord your God brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you large and beautiful cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, hewn out wells which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. When you have eaten and are full, then beware lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. You shall fear the Lord your God and serve him, and shall take oaths in his name. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are all around you. For the Lord your God is a jealous God among you, lest the anger of the Lord your God be aroused against you and destroy you from the face of the land. Stop for a moment and try to put yourself into the shoes of the Israelites. The older ones could still remember their lives as slaves in Egypt. The younger ones remembered only the wilderness wanderings. For 40 years, their diet has been nothing but manna and water. Yet within a few months, these same Israelites would cross the Jordan and begin to settle in Canaan. They would give up their tents and move into fully furnished homes that they had not built. They would exchange the boring diet of manna for the bounty of the land of Canaan. They would harvest crops that they had not planted from fields that they had not plowed. They would go from being former slaves who owned nothing to being homeowners and landowners. It is difficult for us to imagine just how astonishing this change in lifestyle would be for the Israelites. Perhaps the closest illustration from our own time would be a poor man winning a multi-million-dollar lottery. No thinking Israelite who would experience this amazing change of circumstances could fail to recognize in it the generous provision of God. Yet God sounds a warning here in verse 12. Beware lest you forget the Lord. Now listen to chapter 8, verses 7 to 17. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron and out of whose hills you can dig copper. When you have eaten and are full, then you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, and his statutes, which I command you today, lest, when you have eaten and are full and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, who led you through that great and terrible wilderness, in which were fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty land where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and test you to do good in the end. Then you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. Once again, God sounds a warning. When prosperity comes, do not forget me. If you know the story of Israel in the Old Testament, you know just how great was the danger that the people of Israel would forget God. Israel's fortunes went up and down many times. When the nation remembered God and were faithful to him, times were generally good. When they drifted from him, times became difficult. As we will see in later episodes in this series, God laid out in very clear terms exactly how he would interact with the people of Israel in the coming centuries. He promised that when they were faithful to him, he would bless them with material prosperity, with health, and with security from their enemies. He also promised that if Israel became unfaithful to him, he would begin to withdraw those blessings and would replace them with curses, drought and locusts, harassment from neighboring nations, illness and poverty. There were many times when these penalties led the Israelites to turn back to God. Yet a time came when God was forced to impose the ultimate penalty for their forgetfulness. He would send the Assyrians and the Babylonians to conquer them and expel them from the promised land. We are not Israelites. God has not promised to bless us materially for our faithfulness to him, nor has he promised to penalize us materially when we are unfaithful to him. Yet I believe that we can learn from the warnings that he gave to Israel. Let's take a closer look at a few of the things that God challenges the Israelites to do so that they will not forget him. Listen again to verses 13 and 14 from chapter 6. You shall fear the Lord your God and serve him, and shall take oaths in his name. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are all around you. Here we have 3 positive commands and 1 negative command. Let's examine each one. The first positive command is fear the Lord your God. The verb to fear here refers not only to fear of punishment, but also to respect and reverence. What is your attitude toward God? Do you have a healthy fear of displeasing him? Do you treat him with respect and reverence? One of the antidotes to forgetting God is to treat him with a godly fear. The second positive command is serve the Lord your God. The Israelites had once served the Egyptians. God freed them, but that did not mean that their time of serving had come to an end. God was saying, in effect, you are no longer the servants of Egypt. Now you are my servants. The Apostle Paul began his letters to the Philippians and to Titus by identifying himself as a servant of God. We too, who know Jesus Christ, are his servants. Our duties include worship, prayer, giving, and carrying out the Great Commission. The third positive command is, take oaths in the name of the Lord your God. Perhaps you may feel that this command doesn't apply to us. After all, wasn't it Jesus who said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 34, do not take oaths at all? Didn't he say in verse 37, let your yes be yes, and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one? Well, let's remember what an oath is. It is a promise given to another person in which the oath taker says, I will keep my promise to you because my ultimate obligation is to God Himself. I believe that we can obey this command by dealing with other people in integrity and honesty, not because we fear them, but rather because we know that God will be the ultimate judge of our behavior. Now we come to the negative command. You shall not go after other gods. If you are a born-again believer in Jesus Christ, you know that there is only one true God, the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Perhaps you feel that you need not be concerned about this command. But let's not be so quick to dismiss this command. Just like the Israelites, we live in a world where we are surrounded by people who worship false gods and who follow false religions. We may not be aware of it, but we face constant pressure to compromise our sole commitment to the one true God. We face pressure to adopt pagan practices that have no place in the life of a follower of Jesus Christ. Beware of adopting spiritual practices that have no biblical basis. Things like Buddhist-style meditation or repetitious prayers or reciting the rosary or using prayer labyrinths. To do so would be to go after other gods. Before we conclude our discussion of the danger of forgetfulness, let me take you to chapter 9. In this chapter, God reviews the rebellions of the people of Israel from the days of Mount Sinai all the way up to the time of their arrival on the plains of Moab. Listen to verses 6 and 7 of chapter 9. Therefore, understand that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, do not forget how you provoked the Lord your God to wrath in the wilderness. From the day that you departed from the land of Egypt until you came to this place, you have been rebellious against the Lord. Here Moses connects the positive act of remembering with the negative avoidance of forgetting. Remember, do not forget. What is it that Moses calls the Israelites to remember? Their many acts of rebellion, or to put it more simply, the many ways in which they had disobeyed God. Recalling one's disobedience to God may seem like a negative way to positively keep one's eyes on God. But stop to think for a moment. If you were an Israelite and you called to mind the many ways in which you and your fellow Israelites had disobeyed God, where would those memories lead you? They would lead you to remember not just your failures, but also God's forgiveness. If there is one thing that the Israelites had learned about God, it was that even when they fell into sin, God forgave them. We Christians are a lot like the Israelites. In times of plenty, we have a tendency to forget God. Let us learn from God's counsel to the Israelites how we can keep Him in our memory constantly. Let us give thanks to God for the blessings that He bestows upon us. Let us fear God. Let us serve God. Let us make our commitments in view of our responsibility to God. Let us shun the false practices of false religions. And from time to time, let us stop to reflect on our own failures and the mercy of God, who sent His Son to die and rise so that we might receive His forgiveness and the gift of eternal life.